Let's talk about the business rules table for a moment. One of the questions that any analyst would have is, how do I find the right questions in context to ask my subject matter experts? You know, there are a lot of analysts who have lists of generic questions, and that's fine. The problem with generic questions is that they're just that, they're generic, and they're not specific to the project, and they're not in the context of that project. We really have to ask our questions in the context of that project. So how do I find those right questions to ask in context of the project? And when I have asked those questions, how do I know when I've asked all the questions I can possibly ask in terms of business requirements, not in terms of implementation, not in terms of technology architecture, not in terms of solution design, because there's a lot of stuff to ask there in terms of options. But when it comes to the requirements, without that technology architecture, it's a lot simpler, believe it or not. I know that a lot of people rely on the art of analysis, but we want to turn analysis into a science and have it precise and not base it on art is always in the eye of the beholder. And that's why management sometimes says it's a little bit abstract. We have to get really, really focused and precise in context. So how do I know what the right questions are? And how do I know I've asked them all? How do I know we're there? How do we know there's nothing left to ask? Let's take a look at this table over here. You'll remember that when we went through this in the shoe business, we created a business rules table that was specific to a single process that is serving the customer, for example. And that table gave us the questions to ask. Remember, we had a structure that was based on, first of all, the placeholder question. For a single specific customer, how many products might we sell to that customer, or might that customer ask for? Can they ask for one product? Yes. Can they ask for several products? And we said the answer was yes. Is it possible that the customer never asks for a product or buys a product? And we said, yes, that's true too. And we said, under what circumstances, when we have that zero meaning never, we said, under what circumstances would it be true that a customer never buys a product from us? And we said, well, just because they don't. You know, they ask and we don't have it. And let's say that they never do buy anything after that from us. They ask for a product and they see it and they change their mind. They don't buy it, but they don't come back and buy it something some other day. And we've said the requirement is to keep track of that interaction and the customer and to know what it is that they've asked for, or what certainly what they bought. That's a requirement. How that can be done becomes a solution architecture issue. And we want to deal with the requirement, not with the solution at this point. So this table gives us the questions. When we have gone through all of the cells, we've asked all of the questions that are possible to ask about this process in the context of this process. When all of the cells in here have some kind of entry in it, meaning we've asked the question, that means that there are no more questions to ask. Now, I've heard people tell me, oh, come on, there's got to be some more questions. My answer is, oh, come on, you find the question and tell me what it might be. And no one has yet been able to find a question on a real project that goes beyond what you can find in this table, except for questions that have to do with how things could be done. And that's fair game. But we want to focus on the requirements, not on the solution. The solution comes after the requirements. So, as in good architecture, form follows function. In other words, the shape it takes, form. The solution we apply, form, follows the function. Function is the functionality, that is what we want to be able to achieve. Form follows function. That's what we want to apply here, is good engineering practice. So having said that, how do I find the questions? We do that through the business rules table. And everything we want to find is right there. There's nothing else. Now let's just very briefly look at the notation as a reminder. When we talk about those ones and ends and zeros and so on, that's what we call the ratio of occurrences. Now some people refer to it as cardinality, but I'm going to stick with ratio of occurrences. A one means one only, an n means numerous or several or more than one. Zero in our case means never. It doesn't mean none, it means never. And NA means not applicable, or we can't identify a relationship there. There's one business rules table for one process. So one business rules table for one process, one of these for one of those. Now, at the end of a project, if someone asks for a consolidated model here, you can put them all together. And it's just very easy to do. It's just a matter of mapping them together. There's nothing to be said about that. It's not difficult at all. It's not even challenging. It just takes time to do that. Why would anybody want to do that? Because, or should I say, what does it enable somebody to do if you put that table together into one consolidated table? Database design. Yeah, database designers want that. My suggestion is leave that to the database designers and let the analysts just have the one table per process, and it'll be fine. Let the database designers do their work and the analysts do theirs. So with the business rules table, we always ask these BRT or business rules table questions with the anchor object, this one here, as the subject of the question. For a single specific salesperson, how many customers might that salesperson serve? Could they serve one? Yeah. Could they serve several? Possibly yes. Might they never serve anyone at all? Possibly yes. And in that case, I would ask, what circumstance would that be true? Well, because the salesperson might cease working with us before they serve their first customer. And that would lead to a new event, such as employee ceases. Remember when we put that up before? So one of the ideas is to immediately write down the business rule as it's captured from the subject matter expert. The reason for that is because the shorthand notation, the ones, the ends, and zeros, are absolutely wonderful in terms of data access, in terms of database design ultimately, but it doesn't tell us the verb that was used or the verb structure that was used. We need to write it down so as we know right away what was the verb that was used, because if you change the verb, you might get a different answer. The verb has to be in the context of the process. So if we look at the questions, so remember the first thing we have is that placeholder question. It's rhetorical, it doesn't require an answer, but it gets everybody on the same page. For a single specific salesperson, how many customers might they serve? That gets everybody on the same page and the same thinking pattern. We immediately go on to three questions. Might they serve one customer? Followed by, might they serve several customers? Followed by, might they never serve any customers at all? And if the answer to this last question is yes, meaning that you're writing that zero meaning never, then we have to follow it with, in what circumstance would that be true that they never serve a customer? So the syntax for writing up the rules, you have lots of examples in your textbook and the other materials that you have in terms of syntax. But under the object, such as salesperson, you write the business rule, may serve one customer, may serve many customers, may never serve a customer. This would be your syntax. And then when we write may never serve a customer, we have to give an example or two of the reason for that never condition. So, let me just go back here on the screen. You know, sometimes when we ask these questions of our subject matter experts, you'll notice that these are closed-ended questions that we ask. And sometimes when we ask closed-ended questions, we're really soliciting a yes or a no. But they don't always tell us yes or no. Sometimes they say, well, maybe, or sometimes, or it depends. Well, the really interesting thing about this is that when somebody says maybe is just a shorter way of saying it depends. It means exactly the same thing. Sometimes is exactly the same as it depends and maybe. So the question that I would have as an analyst is when somebody says it depends, I would say, well, tell me a little bit about the circumstances that apply. Because when they say it depends, they're really saying, well, under one circumstance, this is true, and under another circumstance, something else is true or it's not true. If they say maybe, they're saying it's either yes or no. If they say sometimes, they're saying sometimes yes, sometimes no. And they're really just identifying different circumstances. And as an analyst, you have to find out what is that circumstance. Remember that a circumstance is really an event. An event is a condition or a situation or a circumstance or a state that can change that the system in the business has to be able to address and deal with. So when somebody says, well, sometimes I want to find out what the different circumstances are because we're probably going to identify a new event at that point. So part of the answer will apply to the cell you're dealing with in terms of what caused the question, and you're going to find another event in all likelihood when you get answers like that. So sometimes when we ask these questions, I've given you a very strict formula for asking the questions, these BRT or business rules table questions. And there is a formula for sure, but sometimes it just doesn't work. 99% of the time it does, but 1% of the time people say, what? What are we talking about? What's the subject here? The question simply doesn't work. So when that happens, or you find that the grammar is very, very difficult to deal with, before you ask the question, you step back and say, well, look, an example here would be between outlet and customer. But if you know about one outlet or one store, would we ever want to know about the customers who shop there? So if we didn't know how to structure the question in terms of the relationship between outlet and customer, we can ask it this way. And when somebody says, no, we don't care, well, clearly there's no marketing person in the room then. But if somebody says, yes, we want to know about the customers who shop there, then we can say, aha, so in other words, a customer wants to buy a product. So we find an event that way. So we simply ask for the circumstance under which it applies. Well, customers buy products, and we want to be able to keep track of the outlet in which the customer buys a product. Look over here again. See this diagram? If we avoid looking at everything that's going on in this diagram, we have customers ask for products, we sell them a product, and we keep track of the outlet in which they bought the product. We've got it there. And in this business rules table, we ask questions about that as well. So all of these things come together, but they come together in little pieces to make up the bigger piece in the end. So that's another way of finding other events. Excuse me. Let's talk about recursive relationships. Now, I know most of you would rather not talk about recursive relationships because I know, just like me, we slept through that math class. But having said that, recursive relationships are the intersection of like objects. So what we can do is, let's go to this table again over here. And here we have a recursive relationship between product and product. You notice that in the beginning, I just put nice little lines through them so as we can ignore those questions initially. But before we're done, we have to ask questions about these recursive relationships. So it's product to product. How do we ask questions about recursive relationships? Well, instead of using the standard BRT or business rule table questions, as we talked about earlier, we instead say, look, if I know about one single product, would I ever want to know about other same products or similar or related products? And somebody might say, well, yeah, sometimes we have, for example, here we sell, let's call them lime green loafer size 13. Somebody might say, well, yeah, if we sell a lime green loafer size 13, we might want to know about the other products that can be sold to complement that, such as nice orange laces, for example. Or we might want to know because of other same products that are being recalled. So for a single specific product that's being recalled, how many other products can also be recalled? You might say there could be a whole bunch or never any at all. It depends on what the question is. But it enables us to find the other side of the product. For any of you who've been into IKEA, the furniture, the Swedish furniture store, you know that products aren't really products sometimes. For example, they might have a chair, a lounge chair, and a cushion. Well, the lounge chair and the cushion are two different products. So if I know about one product, the lounge chair, would I ever want to find the other product that would go with it? You might say, well, yeah, I want to find the cushions that are attached to it. So there could be one other product, several other products, or none at all. If we're talking about that specific example, let's say that there's one or a few other products that become lounge chairs. That way we can match things as well. And there are many, many other examples that we could go through, but we can identify new events. For example, let me give you an example. That project I was working on once, there was a shoe company, just like the one that we've gone through here. And one of the things that they did were very, very expensive shoes. And if you've bought shoes, you may know that one foot is usually a slightly different size than the other foot. So if you have a size 10, that would be a guy now, a man of course, right? A size 10 left foot, you might have a size 9.5, some kind of width on the right foot. Well, most stores are not going to sell you a size 10 left foot and a size 9.5 right foot. But this company that I'm talking about, they did exactly that. Very expensive shoes. But if you needed a size 10 on one foot, 9.5 on the other, they would take size 10 from one pair, 9.5 from the other pair, and you would be a very, very happy customer. But now they, as a company, would have two pairs of shoes that they can't sell anymore because they're not matched. They have a missing right foot from the size 10, and they have a missing left foot from the size 9.5. So what did they do? Well, they checked all the other stores across the country who did exactly the same thing, and they tried to find matching pairs, and they would then ship them to the stores to match them up. So the event would be, believe it or not, it is time to match shoes. Now you can make this any kind of product. It's time to match a product. So then, if we look at this table, for a single specific product, lime green loafer size 13, would we ever want to match it up against other lime green loafers size 13? And the answer in here could be yes, and there could be one or more matches, or there may never be a match at all. In that case, we put that 0 in there. So these tables can tell us a lot simply by asking the question of the subject matter experts, because they know their business. I know they know their business. And if you can ask them clear and concise questions, they can give you the answers. If we ask them abstract questions, they sometimes wonder how to connect that to their business.